When Adam looked out over his yard, he couldn't believe what he saw. A strong odor filled the air and burned the eyes, but Adam couldn't stand to look away. He wasn't the only one. A small crowd of people were there, watching Adam with bewilderment. Unlike the crowd, he didn't feel confused. Instead, Adam was angry, rage bubbling inside him at what his neighbor had done. That rage only built as flashing blue lights and loud sirens approached his home. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. It was any other day at work when Adam received a call from his wife. She was frantic, begging him to come home right away. Initially, he was hesitant to leave work and face repercussions from his job. When she finally managed to tell him what happened, that hesitation flew out the window. He just couldn't believe what had happened. His nosy neighbor had been causing problems for weeks, despite Adam telling him to mind his own business. Of course, the neighbor didn't listen, and now Adam had to deal with the aftermath. He could see a crowd building as soon as he reached his home. They all stared as he parked and tried to collect himself. Curious and nosy people just like his neighbor. He was furious. Why couldn't anyone just mind their own business? After getting himself under control, he opened his car door. The smell hit him right away, strong enough to make him want to gag. Adam's anger didn't stay down for long. When he looked up, he could see his neighbor, John, standing in the middle of his yard. Despite knowing what awaited him at home, Adam couldn't believe the carnage his neighbor had made. Things were only to get worse from here. Seeing her husband, Adam's wife ran out of the house. She stood behind him, just as astounded and nauseated by the sight in their yard as he was. Adam couldn't look away from the mess. His wife could only watch a moment before grabbing him and hiding her face. The sight was too horrible to keep watching, though the growing crowd didn't seem to have a problem. The only good thing about this mess was John's expression. What had likely started as a smug smirk when he first got involved went away the second he made the first cut. Now, he stood there in anger, similar to what Adam felt. Adam focused on his wife as she started apologizing. She knew the dangers John posed, but had been in the kitchen when the neighbor first started. She didn't notice what he was doing until it was far too late to stop him, and he'd already called the cops. Adam wasn't mad at his wife, though. John was the problem here. His neighbor, who now glared at Adam, was the reason this had happened. If he had just listened, everything would have been fine. Adam Murphy lived in Orlando, Florida with his wife Georgia. They had a simple life in a beautiful neighborhood, and most of their neighbors were great. They were polite and mostly kept to themselves. Unfortunately, there was one neighbor Adam just couldn't befriend, no matter how hard he tried. The neighbor, John, was incredibly nosy and always involved in Adam and Georgia's business. Adam had never understood why John felt he had to be so involved in their lives. While John had always been annoying, the last few weeks were the worst as John found something new to focus his attention on. Adam had a large tree in his yard. As fall approached, the tree started to cause trouble. Leaves constantly fell from the tree, never ending no matter how often Adam raked them up. The leaves got so bad at some point that some made their way over to John's yard, which started a fight between the two homeowners. As fall continued, the leaves only grew worse, and both men spent time every day sweeping up messes. John quickly grew sick of it and demanded Adam do something about his tree. He even threatened to cut down the tree himself several times. Adam was also tired of the tree. Under normal circumstances, he'd probably be willing to cut down the tree himself. But he'd learned something interesting about the looming plant that prevented him from cutting it down. On a bright Saturday morning, Adam returned home after his usual morning run. As he approached his house, he noticed John standing in his yard, glaring at a tree with an angry look. Despite the tension, Adam, who always tried to be friendly, gave John a cheerful wave. However, John's reaction was far from warm. He shouted back, "If you don't remove this tree soon, I'll come over and chop it down myself." Adam chuckled, shaking his head as he spoke to John. "I wouldn't go near that if I were you. You never know what might be hidden inside," he warned before heading into his house. Adam had been thinking about removing the old tree for some time, but he understood that dealing with it required professional help. The tree was more than just a nuisance. It was a job for experts who could handle the situation safely and effectively. Adam was shocked when his unpleasant neighbor, John, actually acted on his threats. After attempting to cut down a tree, Adam discovered a mysterious substance hidden inside. Realizing the gravity of the situation, he understood that dealing with this issue required experts in protective gear. This wasn't something he could handle alone. John, who had no idea about the complexity of the problem, was about to face a very expensive lesson as the situation unfolded. That week, an unexpected event occurred. On Monday, just before noon, Adam's phone rang with a call from his wife. He was in the middle of an important meeting and decided to ignore it. However, when Georgia called repeatedly, Adam realized he needed to pick up the phone immediately. It became clear that something serious and urgent was happening, and he couldn't ignore the gravity of the situation any longer. Something was clearly wrong with Georgia. It started with a desperate phone call from his wife, pleading for him to come home right away. Initially, he told her it wasn't possible. However, when she revealed the gravity of the situation, his plans changed instantly. Adam rushed out of work without informing his boss or his colleagues. He had urgent matters that required his immediate attention and action, and nothing would keep him from addressing them promptly. The drive home felt like it went on forever. Adam sat silently, struggling to stay calm, though his anger was simmering just beneath the surface. He couldn't believe the chaos he was about to face. For weeks he'd asked his neighbor to stop interfering, but the neighbor had ignored him. Now the damage was done, and everything was in ruins. As Adam turned onto his street, his heart sank when he saw a large crowd gathered in front of his lawn. When Adam pulled into his driveway, he noticed that everyone was watching him. He took a deep breath to calm himself before stepping out of his car. He was seething with anger, wondering why people couldn't simply mind their own business. After a heavy sigh, he took out his keys from the ignition, but as soon as he opened the door, a foul odor struck him. He had to fight the urge to gag immediately. The stench was overpowering. Adam almost fainted as he stepped onto the sidewalk. His heart sank when he saw his yard. The tree had been slashed, and a dark liquid oozed from it, coating the grass in thick brown goo. Fear gripped him, not just for the damage, but for what this exposure meant. He glanced at the gathering crowd. Parents with their children stared at him with disapproval, making him wonder if they knew more than they should. His palms were slick with sweat. Frustrated, he snapped, "Go home. This is none of your business." "We're not going anywhere." Nathan, a neighbor, retorted, "This stench is unbearable. It affects all of us." Adam ignored him, pretending not to hear, but he knew he was in trouble. His secret was no longer hidden, and the legal consequences loomed over him. John, his neighbor, stood in the middle of the yard, surveying the mess. The damage was beyond anything Adam had imagined. As he took a step closer, his wife, Georgia, rushed outside, her eyes brimming with tears. "I thought we had more time," she whispered, her voice shaking. Adam pulled her close, feeling the weight of her fear mirroring his own. "Yeah," he sighed, staring at the ruined yard. "Nothing would be the same again." "Do you think John will call the police?" Georgia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sure he will," Adam muttered, his shoulders tensing. "I just don't know how serious this is." The onlookers watched in silence, their judgment palpable. The tree, once thriving, now bled a sticky, foul-smelling substance. Adam had seen this coming. He had warned John to leave the tree alone, but the man hadn't listened. Regret gnawed at him. John had disregarded his warnings, and now Adam was left to deal with the consequences. The expression on John's face was accusatory, but Adam knew where the blame truly lay. Georgia squeezed his arm. "I saw him do it," she whispered, "but by the time I got outside, it was too late." John stood covered in the vile substance, rage burning in his eyes. The thick liquid refused to soak into the ground, only spreading further. Adam felt himself unraveling. How would he clean this up? If only John had listened. Adam was ready to confront him, but Georgia held him back. "Wait," she urged. If we handle this right, maybe he won't call the police. We can't afford to make things worse." She was right. He had to be careful. Losing his temper now wouldn't help. Taking a step back, he tried to steady himself. Then John's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Hey, Adam," he sneered. "Good luck explaining this to the police. I've already called them." Adam's stomach dropped. The situation was worse than he had feared. Adam's heart sank. The damage was done, and there was no undoing it. His yard was a disaster, and fear crept in as he thought about the consequences. The truth about the tree had come to light, and now, with their neighbors furious, he and Georgia were in a precarious situation. Could they be arrested for this? The stench was unbearable, and whispers spread through the crowd. Georgia clung to Adam, her voice trembling. "I'm so scared, honey." Adam wanted to reassure her, but he was paralyzed. The tree's oozing liquid reeked of something unnatural. He should have acted sooner. Now, as John stood ankle-deep in the foul substance, anger twisted his expression. Adam was at a loss. The burning smell filled the air as the onlookers coughed. Then, flashing red and blue lights appeared on the horizon. His stomach dropped. The police had arrived. Officer Jones stepped out of his car, surveying the scene. "Good afternoon. I received a call about vandalism." Before Adam could respond, John spoke up. "That's me. This tree has been dropping debris in my yard for weeks," he snapped, gesturing toward a few scattered leaves. The officer frowned, clearly unimpressed. "What's going on here?" Frustrated, John continued. "I warned him, but he didn't do anything, so I cut the tree myself." The officer's gaze sharpened. "Did you have permission?" John hesitated. "No, but—" The officer cut him off. "So? You trespassed and destroyed someone else's property?" John's face paled as Adam's relief grew. The realization dawned. John had made a mistake. The officer turned to Adam. "And what exactly is leaking from that tree?" Adam finally spoke. "The tree started deteriorating last winter. Rainwater collected at the top, rotting it from the inside. I had planned to have it removed." The officer nodded, then faced John. "You're the one who called this in, yet you're the one who committed vandalism?" John's mouth opened in shock, but no words came out. In the end, he was ordered to compensate Adam for the damages. By the end of the week, the tree was gone. In the following months, John learned to keep to himself. And as for Adam and Georgia, they enjoyed their well-earned peace.